Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 158 of my modded Factorio playthrough. Now that we've got blue science researched, it's time to calculate it in Hellmut here. And we've already kind of calculated it to some extent right here. But let's put it on its own line so it's a little less noise going on and we can more easily concentrate on just the blue science. Because we know that everything else is already lined up for it. Is it not on this line right here? That was weird. Guess I just had to click it a few times. So we know we want 3. And there's our requirements, but now we have modules to consider. So we want to go in here, and we can use productivities. And since we have no limitation on how big we can make this, we might as well just use all productivities rather than having to upgrade it in place. And it goes up quite a bit to 83 machines, but that'll cut down on resources. You see this was 3 per second, now it's 2.5, and that's just by upgrading those machines. So let's go down the list and calculate everything. We need the sulfur light sources here. It just has a chemical input, but it needs to be made in a chemical plant, and the advanced plants are slower than the regular ones, so if the regular ones are available, you should always use them. And it cannot use productivity modules. You can see we need 5.6 of them. So let's just throw 2 speeds in there. And now it's less. Basically, you want to look at that. You don't want to put so many speeds where you need like 0.1 machines or something like that. So if it's below 1 machine, there's kind of no point in throwing a bunch of speed modules in there. You should probably do like efficiency modules or something. And this uses some previous components, but we're only making the bare minimum for the other science. So this setup will need to produce its own components. Since with this electronics assembling machine, we only need 0.4 of them. We don't really need to put any speed modules in there because we're already down to 1 machine. And we can't use productivities, so we'll just throw a bunch of efficiencies in there. And it's giving us the warning here because we've hit the minimum energy consumption of 80%, so there's no point in putting more, but we've actually hit it exactly, so we're not wasting modules. This is kind of a situation where if you had the pollution reducing modules, this would be a place to put them because you're just wasting modules trying to go any lower than this, so you might as well put some modules in there that actually have an effect. Made from the micro wafers. It's the same situation. Made from wafer stamp, and we need exactly 1 machine. So there's still kind of no point in putting speed modules in there. And those are the rest of the components. Let's see, sulfur dioxide gas. 50 a second sounds really low. It's probably well within the range of what the factory can do here. And all of this is sulfur dioxide. I tried looking at this and moving because I'm like, oh, 2.1K, that's per minute. I'm like, no, 126K per minute. So we easily have this. We'll just have to logistically figure out how to get it up there, because it's kind of too much for drones. But we've got it down to the basic resources. We'll worry about getting these plates from coils in a bit. But we'll do the reaction node as well, which needs 3.4 machines. Productivities are unavailable, so we'll put a speed in here. If you just want to move the window to the side here and look, so you can kind of play with this and get it the way you want, but we can see that adding 4 modules does not reduce it below 1. But there's kind of no point in having modules going as close to 1 as possible. Because if we're not reducing it by the machine count, there's kind of no point in throwing more in there. Now they do reduce energy consumption in the sense that the speed goes up twice as fast as energy consumption. But you can also reduce it just with the efficiency module. So we can kind of look at the numbers here, where if we use 4 speed modules, it's consuming 509 kilowatts, but if we use 2, and then the efficiency modules, it's 409. So the efficiency modules are better than the speed modules in that sense. And that's down to the basic resources. We'll worry about uncoiling all that stuff later. Now we need this sensors array. And in fact, there's not a lot going on here. Productivities are unavailable, so let's just throw some speeds in there, which reduces the machine count, so that's good. And we don't have nitrogen on a bus system because it's always been produced locally on wherever it's been needed. So we'll probably want to do that, and then we might need to have some kind of system getting the waste oxygen back if we don't want to just throw it away here. But we don't need the advanced chemical plant for that. Regular chemical plant will work. We already need less than 1, so we'll just throw the efficiency modules in there. And then the air filter, and we do need more than 1. So we put a speed in there, so now it's less than 1. And then an efficiency. And the rest of these components are being made elsewhere. The byproduct can be sent back. We might need to reconsider the speed of all of those byproduct consuming machines if it doesn't seem like it's fast enough, but we can either make it bigger or throw speed modules in there, so I'm not too worried about that. And now the complicated thing, the femto laser array. So we'll grab that. Needs 10 machines, and looks like it also needs nitrogen gas. So because of that, let's wait on the nitrogen gas calculation until the end here. And those are 3 separate components, which might be easier to calculate out here. So we need the flash fuel, which is made from 2 separate fuels there. So we still can use the chemical plant for that, since it's above 1. We'll throw some speeds in there, and that got it to 2. Then fuel oil and naphtha. Fuel oil is being produced in very large quantities here. 210. So I imagine we could stand to lose 25 of that to this. But the naphtha is more significant. We have to get this from oil refining, and we have 2 different options. The main way takes just crude oil and gives you a bias towards naphtha and a little bit of base mineral oil, and it looks like we'll actually have a fuel oil surplus doing it this way. And then you can add the gas condensates from natural gas processing, and it changes the priority the other direction towards the mineral oil and produces less of the others. But if you have gas condensates, you might as well use them, because that's the majority of what goes into this, and that just means less crude oil got used. But this is more of a byproduct process. The primary process will be this, but we'll need to do it in both ways. But let's look at the numbers, and I can see that it's linking to fuel oil, not naphtha, because it's producing an excess of naphtha. So let's remove this. We'll come back out here again. Do naphtha, and it's still the wrong numbers where it's linking to fuel oil. So we learned the trick of unlinking the recipe, going to fuel oil and saying 0, that we don't care about that. And now it's linking to naphtha, but unfortunately it's not linked with this, because if you hit this it just goes back. But at least when you do this, it makes the numbers right without you having to mess with stuff. So we will produce our naphtha, and we will not produce all of the fuel oil, but we'll produce most of it. That requires 3 oil refineries. So let's see, do we have access to any of the other tiers, or just the first one? We do have access to the second tier. So we'll do oil refinery 2. So can we get this down to 1 machine since there's no productivity modules? We can, but is that exactly 1? Always makes me nervous when I see that. Probably could put more decibels on there, but I feel like that's too much going on here. But let's see, because I know you can change decimal places. Let's see if factory number format is the one. It is. And what is element number? Is that like inserters and pipes and things? Yeah. Let's do that. I think I originally had it like that, and I changed it because I thought it was just too much numbers, too many decimal places there, but because that was causing problems, probably should do that. So now we know it is below 1, so we don't need a 3rd module in there. We could just do an efficiency module. And then crude oil. But we don't want to do the oil sands way. We want to do the regular way, which requires multi-phase oil. Gives us wastewater, the crude oil, and raw gas. This is already below 1, so let's throw some efficiency modules in there. And then finally, we'll need some pump jacks. And we'll probably be able to get away with just a ton of productivity modules. One advantage of throwing a bunch of productivity modules in is you're increasing productivity, but after 3, you hit the speed limit of negative 80%. So any additional productivity modules you throw in don't slow it down anymore. So they become free at that point. But let's just throw productivity in there so the oil lasts longer. It should be fine since the oil patches have a high starting percentage, but we'll see how that works. Now this does create some byproducts here, creates raw gas. And if we come all the way up here, raw gas is what goes into processing the natural gas. And we do use it up here. We don't need it in very large quantities, but hey, we wouldn't have to mine it out of the ground if we had a little bit of extra. So if we just send a drone up here, we can have a tank here and just making this run less. It's less about the efficiency and more about making the byproducts go away. So we don't have to worry about the raw gas, and we don't really have to worry about the sulfuric wastewater either, because sulfuric wastewater is a byproduct we already have. So if we throw it on the drone network, it will make its way to get processed. So the only thing to consider here, it's kind of a side thing, is that we need to process the condensates that are being made. And right now they're being stored in this fluid depot and all the way down to the storage warehouse of stuff we can't use. But it's only 160 barrels, so it produces it very slowly. So we could just do this setup, but have a separate oil refinery that just uses any available condensates. And then if it can't run, this will run. So we don't have to do that in Helm mod. We just have to remember to use it up. So that'll be one less byproduct that the factory has to deal with. So we come back here. It will create an output of mineral oil, but not that much, 10, because now that the drones do 1,000, I'd have to calculate that out. That might be within the capacity of a drone, because that's pretty small for a train, and it will require an input of fuel oil. So the next component of the laser array is the laser foci, just silver glass and the copper there. Since we need 10 machines, they can't use productivity. So we throw some speeds in there to lower the amount of machines we're going to need. And finally, the laser emitter, which is just some more basic components here. Throw the speed modules in there because productivities are unavailable. Then we come back and look at these resources. Now that we know everything that goes into it, we can calculate nitrogen separately. So we'll do that from a chemical plant. Productivity are unavailable, so we'll do a speed to get it below 1 plant, and then an efficiency. And we need it out of the air compressor. And unfortunately, using 2 of them does not get it below 1 machine. So if that's the case, we might as well put efficiencies in there. So we want to make sure these numbers look pretty good. They seem to so far. Oxygen's a little high. That might be worth dumping. One option we have is to have a multi-product train. So for example, we can have a train that picks up oxygen, picks up wastewater, picks up mineral oil, and maybe drops off fuel oil using the 4 different cars. And then it could stop like right here or something. And when you look at a lot of these pipes, it's a lot of the same stuff, so it would be pretty easy to run pipes up here for a train station. So that's an option we have for that. So you want to look at all these numbers. See, they're a lot smaller than I remember, the 63 copper plates. Now, some of the copper is going into the electronic boards and the circuit boards, but still, that's a lot less than it was up here with its 156 plates. So that's something the factory can actually do. So that's quite good. So we don't need to calculate the boards or anything. They're already being made elsewhere, and we already took it down to its most base components, calculating science out here. So we have an idea roughly of what goes into it, so we don't need to do that again. Now we should just go through and take care of all of these plates and whatnot. A lot of this stuff could probably be copied from other setups since they're fairly similar. But let's grab all of these things here, and then we can put the necessary modules in there. Certainly can do productivities in that one, since they're so slow. All of these really are so slow, where it barely affects it. However, with iron, we need the whole machine. Now, previously we were putting like a productivity in there which would knock it up to needing 2 machines, and then a speed, which would knock it below needing 2 machines. But there's no reason why we can't just use 2 machines, or even use 3 machines, to cut down on the resources. So, when we're building a new setup, should basically use as many productivity modules as you can get away with. Because it just means less resources go into it. And that appears to be exactly 1. This one we need to do the same for the plates here. It's actually going to be a fairly large number, especially when we throw productivity modules in there. But that's fine. This is going to be our first time building a setup that's going full bore with the productivity modules, so we're going to see some pretty big setups here. So keep going down, looking at everything, updating anything that needs it. So now we go back and look, and it's reduced the copper to 13.13, but that's the copper sheet coils. But multiplied times 4, that's like, what, 50 something or whatever? That's still less than like the 64, so it's gotten even lower as a result of doing that. And that's kind of the idea of what would go into this, as far as numbers. And they're surprisingly low now, except for the things that we're dumping huge numbers into, like aluminum. And glass is actually too high. I don't know if that was an oversight on this other setup. Might have been. Or maybe I considered that, but 42 glass, we can't actually make it that fast, and that's more silicon, which is going to be problematic. Right now, the entire factory's output of silicon, which never runs that fast, is 22.5 glass. That's nowhere close. And with the blue science, we would have access to better glass making and make that silicon go longer. So hopefully, with upgrades, we'll be able to make that work. But for now, let's just leave it. Certainly, it will have burst capacity that the train station will be holding huge numbers of glass, so for short periods of time, this will run at full speed. Well, with the exception of the belt limitation of 30 per second, but it'll be close. The other consideration is the sodium hydroxide, because not only do we need it for this, but we need it for aluminum as well. And we can kind of figure out how much sodium hydroxide we would need because we're already using it to make aluminum, and 32 is a little high, but it's roughly 8 that we would need. And the science needs another 5. So roughly 13 per second. It's probably not possible, but let's see what all of these do. 9. It's actually not terrible, but it will also come in bursts based on when the trains run. So we probably won't need it that fast. We certainly do not have enough of it on hand to start this process, so we will need to start generating some sodium hydroxide, but that's doable using the existing setup. So it's important to look at your completed setup and make sure that our factory is already doing all of this stuff and there's no weird byproducts or anything. I mean, we'll have to do the oil processing, but none of the outputs are weird outputs and none of the inputs are weird. And they seem to make sense. Okay. Well, one thing we can do is go through the factory and try to prepare as much of it as we can for this new science. And one thing we can do is electrolyze the saline water. In fact, that's really the only thing we can do to make sodium hydroxide. But we can generate sodium hydroxide if we vent chlorine selectively. So if there's no immediate requirement for these chemicals, for these to run, all we need to do is dump chlorine, and then it will start producing more chlorine, basically having an output of sodium hydroxide and an output of oxygen. And the way the oxygen works is if there's any extra, it just gets sent to get burned. So that will be pretty reliable as well. Kind of wanted a larger tank of chlorine to handle this venting. So let's disconnect it for now. Let's put a chlorine tank in there. And I probably don't need to do any of this to try to save the chlorine because we're just going to start dumping it. But let's just empty the tank. So now those two sides need to be connected. But we can put a pump on the other side here. And this wire is a little bit in the way. Can we do that? Okay. And a flare stack. And this pump will have two conditions that it runs. The first condition is that we are low on sodium hydroxide, which means time to dump chlorine in order to produce more. However, the other condition for it to run is that chlorine has to be high. Because if chlorine isn't high, there's kind of no point in dumping more of it, because it could technically keep running and prevent any of this stuff from going at all, because it just monopolized all of the output. And it certainly will, because it's a powerful pump hooked up directly to the tank. So we need some combinators in here. We'll put 2. This one looks like chlorine gas, and if it is above, let's say, 80% or 40,000, it is okay to dump. And the other one, we'll look at sodium hydroxide is low, and let's say the low point is 10,000. That's kind of a high number to have, but because this is all on a drone path, it's probably going to take a period of time for it to actually update, so I don't want us to potentially run out while this is on. Also send a green square. And if it has both green squares, it can turn on. So now we need to get the sodium hydroxide signal down here, and that's going to be a little annoying because it's just going to have to go all the way down here. And it looks like there's a lot of red wires. Like a lot of red wires in there. So using green wires might make that a little easier. Sigh. Alright, so here we go. Gonna have to take this really long path. At least we can try to connect some of these so it doesn't have to go quite as far. Man, this wire is just going through all these random systems. That is going to be a pain to upgrade if any of this stuff has to move. Well, hopefully signal transmissions aren't too far away, and that will make doing this kind of logic significantly easier. Okay. Well, let's go across the way here, because we need to connect it. Sodium hydroxide is sending the green signal because it's below 10,000. But chlorine is not, because it's not at the high point yet. So when we connect this, all these electrolyzers should start going, and eventually it's going to overload on chlorine, which should cause the venting to occur. And I'm actually wondering if maybe this should be lower, 5,000, because I know it's going to take a period of time for this to update, but I don't know if it's going to be 5,000, because I want to leave some room in the storage warehouse. So, well, but unfortunately if we do that, we can't see it run. So maybe we should set this to 10,000 just to see how it runs. But we put this in here. And now we are producing the sodium hydroxide. This level is going up, and we need a little tank level to make life easier. Combinator. And the big Nixie tubes. So chlorine. So there we go. That kind of shows you, and as that happened, it hit at 80%. And now this is venting chlorine. Is it actually going to be enough, or is the level going to keep going up? Uh-oh. This is going to be a lot of pollution. Well, if that's the case, then let's put them out here. And see if that's enough. If it weren't Factorio guy here and immune to pollution, we'd be dead right now, standing next to this. But there we go, that's enough to get the level down. Why aren't these ones running? Is it just not enough saline water? No, the hydrogen is having trouble getting out. What kind of flow rate is this for hydrogen? 540. Let's see. Well, first things first, whenever you're having flow problems and you're using those valves, dump the valve and put a pump in its place. So 80% is hydrogen, has to be above 16,000. Let's see what that does. That should help. Let's see if these end ones start running. Mostly, but now they have a shortage of saline water. Does the factory actually have saline water? Yeah, it's just the level is low, so it's low through these pipes as well. Yeah, which is causing some throughput issues, which we can fix if we run this on its own saline water tank. So we'll connect that there. Wait, how is that pump not getting any electricity? Is it just in the spot that doesn't get it? Seems like it. Well, let's put some more Nixie tubes up here so we can see what's going on. So, tank is empty. Now what does the rest of the factory look like? Alright, much more empty. Level's going down. And are we producing more? Trying. We may want to have more plants than this. Because I have noticed that during high usage, especially like when we're farming, that the factory doesn't have enough saline water. Because it's a byproduct, so the level can naturally get pretty low. So we might want to see about making some more here. But this automated process seems to work. Dumping sodium hydroxide in there. And looks like it's being delivered. We'll leave it at 10,000 for now. And see what happens. Alright, let's see if we can make some more saline water for the factory here. Don't know exactly how many machines to make, but how about let's just double it for now. It's not that big a deal, but I have noticed like farming has slowed down a bit sometimes because there's a shortage of saline water, so you kind of don't want that to keep happening if possible. Not sure why the belt is so far out when it doesn't need to be. It can be like right there. There's a lot of weirdness going on right here. Let's see if we can do something about that. We'll have a second set of machines. We don't need the belt on this side. Let's upgrade all of this stuff to the better pipes. And are there better ways of doing whatever is going on here? Sure seems like there would be. This is a very old part of the factory, so who knows? We can upgrade this. Connect that. Then it won't need all of that. And then I guess because the road was there, that was being a little weird. Well, we can do underground right there. Also, probably should have a better saline water control than this. In fact, these setups work pretty well. It's kind of an extra pipe in there, but let's see. Let's grab this. We'll put it in here, try to line it up at least somewhat with this here. Put that in there, then we won't need these clarifiers. Because this will still dump it if it needs to. But now we can set this logic right here to the status of this tank, which is nearby. And we don't have to deal with this guy here. Let's put the better pumps in here because why not? And that can all be connected. And then this just needs an output of one seafloor pump, but how much do all of these machines use? It seems like it would be an awful lot. 480 and one pump does 300. So we'll definitely need 2. Let's see, this one is exactly 300. So it's actually kind of an error to attach these 2 systems together. It's probably a good excuse to look at Pipe Visualizer here. Make sure everything still lines up. And it sure seems to. And we got a road here, so we have to compromise a bit on where this gets put. But there we go. Oh yes, and of course, the mud inserters. Oh, and the power poles don't reach. Well, they do now. So there we go, that's a bit of a retrofit to saline water production. Hopefully works out. And it might seem like they're going kind of slow because this number isn't going up very fast. Well, remember that there's these saline water storage tanks all over the place with clarifiers connected to them. So it's actually the entire network has 230,000 saline water in it right now, even though this tank is only at 8%. 180 per second. It's not bad. Well, we'll have to see how this works in the long run, and hey, at least this is a little more copyable, or we can just make more if we need to. But it's not going. Ah, because the saline water is set to the wrong number. So 20% of that tank is 10,000, so that needs to be 10,000. There we go. And of course, more mud for the factory. We could have used a salination plant for this. It's certainly a very fast machine, very compact. But generally, mud is quite valuable, and we need it for all kinds of farming, so there's kind of no reason not to just do it this way and get the mud. Because even if you have too much mud, you'll get landfill out of it, and as you see, there's no landfill in here, so all this mud that's been generated and moved all around the factory has been used. So we haven't had too much of it. And that's the end of this episode. On the next one, we're going to build a farm that will grow crystal dust. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.